Welcome to Film at 50, a podcast that celebrates semi-centennials in the world of cinema. I'm your host, Brian Rowe, and I'm very excited to welcome Harrison Blackman to the podcast today for this exclusive bonus features episode talking about the new Netflix movie Mank and the career of David Fincher. How are we doing, Harrison?
Doing well. How are you?
Doing well. It's good to see you again. We recorded an episode, I want to say about 2 months ago, for I Never Sang for My Father, the most awkwardly titled movie I think I've done for the podcast so far. And
That,
we
that was
talked
2 months ago. I
that
think
was
time moves in interesting ways now. So
yeah, that was we're recording this in early December. We recorded the episode about that film in early October. You were one of my very first guests, so thank you for so much for coming back to talk about one of the big kind of end of year releases, I would say, was Mank by David Fincher. I have been aware of this movie for more than a year. They shot it between October of 2019 and February 2020, and I'm a huge Fincher fan. He's one of my top 3 to 5 living directors right now, and it'd been a long time since he'd made a movie. 2014 was his last release, Gone Girl. He's been doing Mindhunter in between, which is like, it's like kind of helped me get through these long periods of no Fincher. But I've been wanting to see a new feature film from him, so it was nice to finally get one after 6 long years. I thought we'd start by talking about Citizen Kane, because that film plays kind of a significant role in the movie Mank, although not as significant as I assumed.
right, yeah,
I don't know about you, but I really tried hard to avoid spoilers and not read reviews. And I was under the impression a big chunk of Mank was about the making of Citizen Kane, of writing the screenplay by Herman Mankiewicz. And, I thought they were going to go into the production. And yeah, that's not what this movie
well,
was at
I
all, really.
I guess it kind of fell in the category where it was branded as this is like Ed Wood or Shakespeare in Love, where here's the genius writer, and they're going to have weird interactions with people, and that's going to inspire the movie, and it'll be it'll be a blast. It'll be like that.
Yeah, I think
It wasn't that. Yeah,
I think a way for them to pull in potential viewers of this movie was to kind of, you know, sprinkle this idea like there's going to be a lot about Citizen Kane, which is one of the most famous classic movies ever. But if you go into Mank thinking, oh, this is a behind the scenes of Citizen Kane, you're going to be disappointed. And about an hour in, I was like, okay, I need to separate my expectations from what I thought this movie was going to be. And, I just watched it last night. I'll probably revisit it in the weeks to come just to get a little bit, because I did expect a certain kind of movie that I didn't get. So that was kind of a weird experience. But Citizen Kane plays a role in this. It's kind of in the, it's one of those movies in Mank where we have moments, from previous years, kind of seeing how we get to now. But the current storyline is him writing Citizen Kane. He has just a couple months to put it together. Citizen Kane is a movie I've had a troubled relationship with, and I would love to hear your take on what is considered by many critics the greatest film of all time. What is your take on Citizen Kane from 1941?
well, I think I first watched it in high school. I think most people first watch it in high school, right?
Yep.
And I watched it. I think my dad had a VHS of it, and I put it in TV, and I watched it on an old TV with a VHS tape. And I was like, okay, so it's the sled. Yeah. Spoiler alert.
A spoiler alert. Okay, if you're listening to
Yeah.
this, it's one of those things I talk about all the time. When I told a group of students the end of The Sixth Sense, and half of them are like, "I didn't know that." I was like, "Oh, sorry." For those of you younger listeners, we apologize.
Right. So, aside from the sled, I think I watched it and I was like, okay, I don't really know how to process this. And coming back to it now, watching it again, and also on a better screen, and streaming is a better quality than VHS, I think. I was like, wow, okay, so the transitions and the storytelling of Citizen Kane are really influential, and seeing like scenes where they show like a photograph, and then Orson Welles will walk in front of the photograph, and it's this is actually a live scene, and like those kind of things. Those pyrotechnics are amazing in terms of like this is in 41.
Mm-hmm.
This is like if you think about like the Maltese Falcon or Casablanca, like other movies
Yep.
around that time, the
Mhm.
camera is very static and not
Mhm.
moving at all, and you're just relying on Humphrey Bogart's charm to get you through the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I think technically it's very influential and an achievement, and the writing. Now I appreciate the writing more and how clever the Citizen Kane writing is.
Mhm.
Uh, but I'd still rather watch Vertigo, which is also
which surpassed,
yeah.
what was the poll? I want to say it was 2012. Sight and Sound.
Sight and Sound made Vertigo the best movie ever.
Citizen, it's every
Yeah.
10 years, right? They meet up every 10 years, and Citizen Kane was number one every 10 years, right? Until 2012, and then it became number two, and Vertigo became number one, which is such an interesting, like, Vertigo was not a popular film when it came out, and it was kind of seen as one of his failures, one of Hitchcock's failures. North by Northwest and Psycho, which were much more popular with critics and with audiences at the time. And for Vertigo to now be considered by this poll the number one movie of all time. It's so good. Like, Vertigo is great, but it didn't, it took a while for that film to find its place.
Well, I mean, so did Citizen Kane.
Yeah.
But mostly because William Randolph Hearst tried to destroy it. But I mean, there are a lot of reasons why. I mean, I think Orson Welles is a really challenging figure to talk about because, I mean, he was this egomaniac.
Oh, yeah.
But he was really talented. And, I always teach my students at UNR, when we talk about podcasts, there's a podcast about the War of the Worlds broadcast that Orson Welles did.
Yeah. 1938, I think.
Yeah. And I make them listen to a Radiolab episode that talks about Orson Welles' version of the podcast and the prank and the reactions and why people could have thought that aliens were really in New Jersey.
I totally buy that. Like, in 38, you hear that on the radio, you'd be like, oh my God.
Well, especially because they had like a fake concert band playing. They'd be like, oh, we're interrupting with a news report. And then it's Orson Welles' voice. And he's like, I'm seeing the aliens and they're coming out from the fields now. And he sounds like William R. Morrow.
Yeah. And was he a known figure in 38? Like, did listeners on the radio, like, did they like recognize Orson Welles' voice? I want to say they didn't know who he was in 38, right?
No, because he was the Mercury Theater, and like that was like a New York thing they were doing, but he wasn't really a national figure until he got into movies, right?
Yeah, because he was kind of big into radio for a while, and then got into it's crazy to think about his first movie was Citizen Kane, which is like one of the rare kind of directors who just the very first film just absolutely fantastic, really considered one of the best films, and then never was really able to replicate that throughout the rest of his career, and had lots of stops and starts with movies he tried to get off the ground. And pretty much every movie after Citizen Kane, it was hard for him to get final cut, like getting his version of the movie on the screen was tough, even with Kane, right? Because there were people trying to stop its release and things like that. But after Kane, it's like I mean, Touch of Evil, Magnificent Ambersons, all these like famous films that could have been something else, and you're kind of pulled away from him in editing.
Well, I mean, The Third Man, I think.
Third Man.
That's a really good movie.
Yeah, he was just the actor in The Third Man, right? That's someone else's director.
Yeah.
But so it's not to say that only Citizen Kane is the only film that he's done that's any good. I mean, obviously there's other ones. I love Touch of Evil. Have you seen Touch of Evil?
Yeah. Well, I don't love that Charlton Heston plays a Mexican.
Yeah.
It doesn't really make any sense. But he's known for not playing people that he shouldn't be playing.
Yeah.
Like Moses. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a whole nother conversation. Films of like the 50s and 60s, and you have that problematic elements to it. Technically, the film is really strong, and I think probably his second best of the films he's directed that I've seen. I haven't seen all of them. But Citizen Kane, I struggled with for a while. In high school, I was a very big film person, and this is considered the best movie of all time. And on my third attempt to watch Citizen Kane, I was probably like a junior, senior high school. I was about an hour in, and I said, I cannot watch this movie for one more minute. That was my relationship with Citizen Kane as a younger person. And what happened was it took me getting the DVD and listening to Roger Ebert's commentary about the movie that made me finally really appreciate it and see why it's so important and why it's such a great film. And ever since I listened to his commentary, I've been able to watch the movie like with a different lens. And I still don't love it as a movie, as like a way to spend 2 hours in terms of like its entertainment value. I really look at it more as like this, example of technical brilliance all the way through. So innovative with storytelling and with the camera work and the editing. And, watching it again last night, I was struck again just how brilliant it is on that level.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that take. And it is like, when you're making a biopic generally, and we can talk about this with Mank too, it's really hard to distill someone's life into 2 hours, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times movies will resort, especially Oscar bait type movies, like Lincoln or The Imitation Game or A Beautiful Mind, like that kind of genre of Oscar-y biopic. They will like turn one decision in the person's life into like the dramatic moment. So like in
story.
The Darkest Hour or Lincoln, I think both of them rest on like one speech or one piece of legislation, and it's one thing that they do, and that's what defines them because it's a movie and it has to obey dramatic rules or something. But that's not realistic at all, because like, come on, Churchill was doing a lot of more interesting things than Darkest Hour, or reducing Lincoln to just passing the 13th Amendment is like, that's not everything that he was or did. So by Citizen Kane, by jumping around using different perspectives, you never really understand who Hearst is, and you're not supposed to because you can't. And I think Mank does that too. We have this elliptical structure where we see Hearst from a distance, played chillingly like cold by Charles Dance, right? Seeing Tywin Lannister again and being very, very creepy, but you get glancing moments of him, and then finally you get a scene with him, but it's still obscure.
Yeah, I think it depends on the movie because it doesn't always work either way. I think Citizen Kane, it does the thing of like, let's tell the entire story from childhood to now, and you kind of need that for the ending to have the emotional impact that it does. Watching it again last night, I've never liked how it opens after that beautiful opening scene of his death, which I love. That long, 6+ minutes of the newsreel. I've never liked that. And
I think the newsreel would work if it was 2 minutes.
It's so
15
long.
minutes.
It's like, it's just info dump on the screen. Here's everything you need to know about this guy.
Xanadu.
And I always forget how long it is. It just goes on and on. And I'm like,
he tried to get into politics by marrying the president's niece.
And then we go into his life in full for the rest of the movie. So I don't understand why that needs to be as long as it is. And then the next scene, it's like, so he said Rosebud. And it's like, nobody was in the room. Who heard him say Rosebud? Does that ever bother you?
Shouldn't they start with, I mean, I like the scene where they're all in the shadows and they're like, Rosebud, what is it?
Yeah.
Who is this guy? Kane. Charles Foster Kane. What are we gonna write? Like that's really funny to me. But I think if you cut that opening in a modern movie, right? You can have an opening, but it can't be longer than 5 minutes of like a newsreel type thing.
And I like the look of the newsreel, but I'm just watching it again last night and I'm like, okay,
it's like it's still going.
The greatest film of all time should not have this long of an info dump of things we're going to learn about him anyway. It's not like it's revealing stuff to us we don't find out later.
Think about it this way: like if you take it out,
what changes?
Well, how do you set audience expectations if you don't give us the full arc of William Randolph Hearst's fictitious life?
Yeah, you're right. I think we need it. I think the film needs it, but I feel like there's maybe a different way it could be delivered, and I think it could be half the length.
Yeah, there are ways to print it for sure. And I think one of the things that Wells is said to have done when he edited Mank's script was to with all the scenes with Kane and his first wife, where it's a montage, like every 5 minutes they have more contempt with each other in terms of how they're looking at each other. Those were all like full scenes back to back to back as Mankiewicz had written, and Wells was like, I just need one exchange per 5 years or something.
Oh, are you talking about the scene where like they're really
sitting at the
close?
breakfast
They're
table.
really close to each other at the table, and then
Yeah.
the dialogue we get 10, 15 seconds, and then it's another few months or years, and then the camera pulls back, and they're really far apart, just reading the paper. You talking about that scene?
Yeah,
That's one of my favorite scenes. I love how that's put together. I love how in just a couple minutes, like you really see the evolution of their, decaying relationship, and how it goes from, them being so kind of in love in that first part, and then they're just reading the paper very far apart from each other. That's economy. That's not 8.
Yeah.
I think if that had been 15 minutes of them just talking, like, that would have been too much. I like how it's cut down like that, and you don't need more than that.
Right. So in some parts there is like really judicious editing and economy. But at the beginning it's like Xanadu! They have elephants! Rhinoceri!
News on the march!
Yeah, and it's like, okay.
I also got to see this movie. I got to see this movie in a theater with an actual film print in film school at Loyola Marymount University in the fall of 2004. William Friedkin, the director of The French Connection and The Exorcist, presented a film print of Citizen Kane to a big group of film students. I want to say it was like September of 2004. And he stayed and did like a Q&A after the movie about his career and about Citizen Kane. So that was a great night. That was after I had listened to Roger Ebert's commentary, and also Peter Bogdanovich, the director, his commentary. He has a great one on the DVD of Citizen Kane. So it's almost like, for me, Citizen Kane is one of those movies that it's, as a story, as a movie, it's good. I don't love it. I don't think of it as one of the great 10, 20 movies, but on a technical level, listening to these, influential critics and filmmakers talk about it and really look at it through that lens makes it a lot more special. And that kind of takes us to Mank, which, as I said at the top, is not so much about the making of Citizen Kane as I expected it to be. And I avoided, I think I might have watched the trailer, but that was about it. I wanted to just go in fresh. And it was a really exciting experience last night to put on a new David Fincher movie. It'd been a long time. And I liked a lot of the movie, but I'll just say off the top, Mank did not work for me very well. I was actually very disappointed in this movie, and it would be, one of the 2 or 3 least of his films, although I admire the technical aspects of it.
Really? You like Panic Room more?
Yes. If I had to pick, and this is
Alien
not
3?
No, Alien 3 is worse. Here's the thing. When I finished this movie, I thought, if someone else had directed this movie and it had not had any buzz, and say Netflix had dropped it in March, April, May earlier this year, and it was directed by somebody I didn't know, I wouldn't have been singing its praises. I would have been like, oh, this is amazing. This is great work. There's a lot I like about it. I love Amanda Seyfried's performance as Marion Davies. All of the flashback stuff I thought worked pretty well. It was kind of the contemporary 1940 stuff with him and his typist, played by Lily Collins. I wanted a little bit more of his actual the act of him writing it and really talking his way through it. It's a lot of
Barton Fink.
It's a lot of him just laying in bed and complaining to Lily Collins, and
he doesn't really struggle to write it. He just writes it.
Yeah, we don't really get the Misery, one of my favorite Stephen King adaptations, really about the act of writing and how it can save somebody's life, and that's a film about writing that this didn't quite go in that direction. And it wasn't a necessarily disappointment that it's not so much about Citizen Kane, but there's a lot of stretches of this movie that I felt kind of meandered, and I couldn't quite find a central core to the story that could get me emotionally invested in this character played by Gary Oldman, who's fine in the movie. He does a good job. But this was not a character I really loved spending 2 hours with. I don't know about you.
Yeah, well, I didn't think of it I think you can't compare this to Fincher's usual subjects, right? Which are, serial killer, mystery, Rosamund Pike being crazy, that kind of stuff. That's a whole different thing than this. And this is, he's, creating this screenplay that his father wrote.
Yep.
his late father, and he's trying. This is a passion project that he's tried to do for like 20 years, right?
Yeah, so his father Jack Fincher wrote this screenplay in the 1990s, and this was supposed to be David Fincher's next movie, like after either Seven or The Game. It was going to be done like in the 90s, and then for whatever reason he pushed it back. So this is his dad passed away in 2003. So yeah, this is definitely a labor of love, and it's the least Fincherist movie since Alien 3. For sure. This does not have a lot of his usual trademarks, which is fine. I'm perfectly happy to go along with the director who wants to do something different. But for me, watching this about the second hour in, I said, okay, this is a David Fincher movie, his first movie in 6 years, and it's about classic Hollywood. One of my favorite subjects in all of film, like to watch a movie about classic Hollywood of the 30s, 40s, 50s. It's one of my favorite. Like whenever there's a movie about that, I'm in love. And the fact that I wasn't ever super invested in what was happening in the movie kind of bothered me. But were you kind of more on board with this one?
Yeah, I enjoyed it, and
Okay.
I found it to be about. This is about writing a story that is at the expense of people you know. And so Mank does have a relationship with Marion Davies, played by Amanda Seyfried. And he's sort of, he's not really friends with Hearst, but he's like in his circle. And he had, as a journalist, he had worked with the Hearst people before. So this is like, it's trying to explain why someone would betray the people they know to write a very famous movie. And I think that's where it gets into like the politics of California, and like Upton Sinclair being a socialist Democrat candidate for governor, who's played by Bill Nye, which is pretty funny. I enjoyed that strange cameo.
That was a very strange casting choice.
Yeah. But also it made sense, I thought.
Yeah.
Like what would drive someone to betray? It would seem like he had a friendship with Marion Davies. What would get you to do that? And I guess Fincher is trying, or Jack Fincher at least, thought that it was because Mank was reacting to Hearst and Mayer publishing fake news about Sinclair, which doomed his election. Which is very convoluted and obscure, and it's not very simple. Like a lot of biopics will be like, A Beautiful Mind is like, oh, Russell Crowe, he's got schizophrenia, and that's really bad,
Yeah.
Like that's,
and I'm all for that. Yeah. I wanted the film to have a little bit more focus. It was all over the place. I didn't like how it just constantly went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I was just trying to find like something at its core to really hang on to. And I thought, okay, if this is going to be about the writing of Citizen Kane, I think it needs a little bit more of that, or take out most of that and have it be about this other element that you're talking about, the politics of California. So many great character actors in this, and actors I wanted to see more of in the movie. Arliss Howard is fantastic as Louis B. Mayer. His walk and talk like through the studio is so great. That was the best minute and a half of the movie. I was like, this is fantastic.
And then he's also saying hi to everyone while he's having this speech, and
like, hi, hey, how's it going? And Mankiewicz walking behind him, and I love that part. Irving Thalberg is in the movie. And David O. Selznick is like a dead ringer for what he looked like. I've only seen pictures of him. But the casting is great.
when Mankiewicz and his writers are BSing their pitch for like a monster movie in front of David O. Selznick, and it's clear they're just making it up on the spot.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I don't know about this one,
Yeah, that guy who just is like put on the spot and he has to like pitch it to Selznick. I'm like, all the I've read a couple books about him. I've read a lot about Hitchcock and their relationship on Rebecca and a couple other films he worked on, and he was very involved. Selznick was not a producer who just kind of stayed out of it and let the director make the movie. He was like looking at footage and sending in notes, and
he was also very addicted to speed, I think.
Probably.
That's what I read on Wikipedia anyway. And that made him very active. and also made him die young.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I was watching this going, if Jack Fincher had not written this, if David Fincher had gotten this script by somebody else, would he have made this movie? I don't think he would have. Do you think he would have made this movie if his dad hadn't written the script? I would be very surprised. I think that's a part of it. I think part of the problem is he's working from his father's screenplay, and he probably didn't want to mess with it very much because his father had passed on. I could see myself in that position. I'm a filmmaker. I can make anything I want. And my father, who has passed on, maybe wrote this one script that was like a labor of love. And to pay tribute to my dad, I'm going to make this movie and get these great actors and do the script justice. I'm probably not going to change very much about, how it was left in 2003 or whenever he finished working on it. So I felt like that might have been part of the issue too. And again, not to say that Fincher has to only make films about serial killers and stuff. I don't care. He can make, whatever he wants. But what really lacked for me in this was urgency. Every Fincher movie, even Alien 3 to some extent, has like a sense of urgency to the narrative. You're always like really fascinated by what's going on, even if the movie's kind of a mess, like Curious Case of Benjamin Button and Alien 3.
I mean, Zodiac meanders,
but it's fascinating.
Right.
I love every scene of that movie. Yeah. Zodiac is probably the most meandering of his films until this one, for sure.
Right. I think like a good comparison to Mank is like Ed Wood, right?
Which I love. I love Ed Wood.
Which is very focused on showing like the process of the worst filmmaker ever.
Yeah.
But filming it in a way that pays homage to Ed Wood and Plan 9 from Outer Space. So, but this felt different. This felt like, I think it's a challenging movie because it's not telling you exactly what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if it was very obvious, and if it was like Darkest Hour or something like a biopic Oscar,
which I also didn't like, by the way.
Right. something that's like, oh yeah,
that was dull.
We should stand up to the Nazis. That's a bold message. That would be boring as heck, I think. And I think this movie, at least, it's not accessible to a lot of people. I think it's a lot of inside baseball that I think even people who like movies, I had to look up a lot of stuff, and I still don't understand a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, is the thesis of the movie that Citizen Kane was written because Mankiewicz was upset that Upton Sinclair lost the California gubernatorial election?
I guess
Upton Sinclair is a Bernie Sanders of that time. So I don't know.
Yeah. That can be the thesis if you read into it that way. But you mentioned Ed Wood, and that is a character played so lovingly by Johnny Depp. That is a character that you love to follow for 2 hours. Every including Bella Lugosi, played by Martin Landau, who got an Oscar for that. I mean, that movie really, it moves along pretty quickly, and you love kind of following those characters. I think my problem with Mank was I loved almost everybody around Gary Oldman as Herman Mankiewicz. I wrote it down. I was like, I don't know if this specific figure needed a 2-hour movie. I was like, I would much rather have spent 2 hours with Marion Davies, because I thought whenever Amanda Seyfried was on the screen, she brought the movie life. She made it kind of sparkle. It was kind of a different performance than we've seen by her. It was a little bit, more modulated than some of her other work, especially like some of those cheesy thrillers she was doing in like the late 2000s and early 2010s.
Right.
This was a really strong performance from her, and I was like, make this movie about her. I'm like more interested in her.
Like I thought, her role, it felt like was if in The Aviator, Cate Blanchett plays Katharine Hepburn, right? And it's a little over the top when Cate Blanchett does it. Like, she does a really good job, but it's still like, it's hard to make a Katharine Hepburn be like a normal person anyway.
Yeah.
So
at the golf course, Howard.
And Seyfried is like playing someone who is less famous than Katharine Hepburn, but also like
Yeah.
adding the sadness, but also like, in Citizen Kane, the movie, the person who, the Susan Alexander character who is based on her is like over the top and a broken woman, whereas Seyfried is her character is way more complex. So yeah, I agree that it is interesting to think about why is it Mankiewicz who is the hero, and I think maybe Jack Fincher was really influenced by Pauline Kael's Raising Cain essay, which is a very controversial essay.
Yeah, so if you want to talk about that, there is a film, I want to say, is it called RKO? Stars Liev Schreiber as Orson Welles. Is that about
I think
this period?
That's about the making of Citizen Kane.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I've been meaning to watch that because I love Liev Schreiber, and yeah, I know I think it was a TV movie that got a lot of buzz and awards and things. I have to check that one out. But that was like I think that's more about Citizen Kane, like all the way through, whereas this movie is only in part of it.
Yeah, like that. I think that I haven't watched that, but from the synopsis, it's more about like Hearst trying to shut it down and like them fighting through that. But yeah, so Pauline Kael was a famous movie critic for the New Yorker, and she wrote a 50,000 word essay.
Wait, 50,000 word essay? That's a book.
It was part of the Citizen Kane book, which was a publication.
Did she write a book about Citizen Kane? I know of her work. She's pretty famous film critic.
This essay was a preface to the first draft of Citizen Kane that was published in the 70s.
Okay.
And so this filled like 2 issues of the New Yorker pretty much before it came out in the Citizen Kane book, which is what it's called. And her main thesis is that Citizen Kane is a shallow masterpiece and is not as good as everyone says it is. Mostly because it seems like she just didn't like Orson Welles. And she alleges that Mankiewicz wrote the whole thing and deserves all the credit, and that Welles didn't do anything to the script, which is not really true because we do know that it was cut down because it was 300 pages long in the first draft. So it's a controversial essay. It's even more controversial because she accuses Welles of basically taking credit entirely for the script because they share screen credit. Even though Kael, when she wrote this essay, she borrowed interviews from a UCLA professor named Howard Suber, and then didn't credit him at all for all of that.
Oh.
So there's a lot of layers to this, and Peter Bogdanovich wrote a rebuttal called the Kane Mutiny, because Peter Bogdanovich was an acolyte of Welles. Well, so.
I love Peter Bogdanovich, everything about him. I don't know if you've listened to the new Turner Classic Movies podcast where he's interviewed for like 6 hours or whatever it is. So fascinating. What a life that he has led.
Right. But Kael, she believed that Mankiewicz was an influential part of at least like 40 movies that she really loved in that era, and that he was a guiding hand behind all of them at MGM and RKO, etc. So that's kind of where I feel like this movie was going, which was like showing that this guy and these journalists who had come from New York, they are the reason that old Hollywood was the way it was. But yeah, I see it's not that clear though. It's not. The movie's very cryptic. It's very obscure. We see things in an elliptical way, probably because it's from Mank's perspective and he's a drunk. So
yeah. And we don't know. We'll never know exactly how this all went down. I watched a clip last night of Mankiewicz's grandson, Ben Mankiewicz, who's the current host of Turner Classic Movies. He was talking about Mank, and he was asked, like, how close is this to reality? And he said, I don't really know. I didn't know my grandfather. I heard stories from my father about him, but yeah, he doesn't even really know how close this is to what actually happened. So if his own grandson isn't familiar, then I don't think we'll ever really know, exactly. And as you bring up, right, like he said, Ben Mankiewicz said his grandfather wrote most of Citizen Kane. Like he was really the author of that screenplay. But you just said that because of the editing that had to be done, and Orson Welles did have a role in that, because the only Oscar the movie won was screenplay, and it was shared by both of them. So, and that's always tricky, right? When they're not actually collaborating together, when they both win, it's like, okay.
But I don't think like this is an exceptional case. I think most movies get script doctoring.
Oh yeah.
And usually it's the first person that starts the script and the last person that ends the script that get the credit. Mm-hmm. And that's just normal. That's just how it works. Mm-hmm. So I don't think this is something to be really torn up about either way, because that's just how Hollywood has worked for 100 years.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I've heard stories of like screenwriters, they write their script and then they go sit in the theater and they look and they watch the movie, and maybe 5 minutes of the 2 hours they can recognize, you know, from their script. Like it's just all different. Like that happens totally.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm not mad that it was made. I think it's an interesting movie.
Oh yeah, no, and I think I'm giving the impression that I really hated it. I didn't hate it. I actually enjoyed a lot of it. It was a matter of super high expectations is what killed this one for me a little bit, because it'd been so long since the last Fincher movie. I wanted something really special and spectacular, and what I got was a solid film about this figure in classic Hollywood. A lot of scenes that I enjoyed. The photography is amazing. The score by Ross and Reznor is as good as anything they've done. You know, totally different from their scores for the last three Finchers, obviously, because of the content. But I was like, I wrote down, I was like, oh, the score, it's really great. Really represents the movie well. And
yeah, they could have ended with a Nine Inch Nails song.
That's right.
Credits.
You know, like really sing about Mank at the end.
Yeah.
But no, I liked a lot of this, and I'm going to revisit it. It's on Netflix. It might be a couple months, but now that I really have a sense of what the movie is and not what I expected it to be, I think I'll probably appreciate it more the second time. So yeah, no, I'm thinking like, 6.5, 7 out of 10. I'm not giving it like a 2 or anything. Like, no, there's a lot of really great stuff about this movie. But I was thinking about, 2 other projects about classic Hollywood of the last 5 years that I loved much more. The first one was Trumbo, starring Bryan Cranston as Dalton Trumbo, the screenwriter. Did you see that from 2015?
I did not see Trumbo.
That's a great movie. Like that movie, and he's playing kind of a problematic guy in that.
Right.
But
he was a communist, right? And that was he was blacklisted.
The blacklisted screenwriter, so they had to like take his name off of movies that he was writing, and like he would write a screenplay for a film and they would have to take his name off, and then the movie would win best screenplay at the Academy Awards, and the name they would read off would be some made up name. Right. I think that happened more than once. And I think it was Spartacus in 1960 where Kirk Douglas made it so that his name would appear in the credits.
That's why they all say I'm Spartacus, right? Because it's like not to McCarthyism.
Yeah, exactly.
Something like that.
Yeah, that's a more traditional biography. I only saw it the one time. It's not
Spartacus.
Like no. Oh no. I mean about Trumbo.
Yeah. Every scene in Spartacus is true to life, I think.
But yeah, that was a great film. And then one of my favorite projects of the last few years was a limited series, Feud, Betty and Joan.
I heard about that.
Susan Sarandon as Betty Davis and Jessica Lange as Joan Crawford.
Right.
It's problematic in that some of what happens in the 8-episode series might not have happened, and so that comes with the territory of all these kind of movies, especially about classic Hollywood, when the figures are not here to defend themselves and things like that. But it was so fascinating. I loved every second of that, and I just didn't have that in Mank. I was more admiring the movie from afar than I was really engaging with it. Like that long scene where he's drunk and walking around that table and everyone's sitting there
at Hearst Castle.
He's pitching Don Quixote. He's like talking about Don Quixote.
Don Quixote.
I'm like, okay, why? Like, and then he just pukes. He like sends everyone running. And that's like a long, what was that, 7-8 minutes? Like that was a long speech he gives. And I'm kind of like, okay, we're kind of nearing the end of this movie. What am I supposed to be thinking and getting out of this moment? He's been drunk the whole movie. Like this is not surprising to me. So yeah, I was more interested in the relationships among the characters, even some of the side characters. and just really taken with the look of the film. And the technical aspects are all, stellar as they are in every Fincher movie. But something was lacking, and maybe I'll have a stronger opinion about the movie when I watch it a second time, now that I know what it's all about. But I
Well, I
was just
think
kind of let down a
maybe
little
it's that, like Citizen Kane,
bit. Yeah,
Mank is a little unknowable. There
yeah.
isn't the emotional connection. You
Mhm.
never are emotionally connected to Kane because he's a jerk.
He's
Right?
not a pleasant, he's not a pleasant guy to spend 2 hours with. I was like, and the way, he plays him, Gary Oldman. I mean, this is not the transformation of Darkest Hour, right? This is like, I think I read that he really didn't do much physically to, become Herman Mankiewicz. He didn't do a lot, like with his face and with his hair. He
Right.
looks, pretty close to how Gary Oldman looks. But there's a lot of this movie where that character is just kind of on like one note. I was like, I want to see a little bit more. Another thing that bugged me, did this bug you at all? And I read a few reviews this morning. I didn't see, like, every scene ends with a slow dissolve to black. There are like 50, 60 examples of that throughout this movie, where every scene ends with a slow dissolve to black. It's like, just cut to the next scene. Did that bother you at all? I noticed that often in this movie.
I did notice that.
And I didn't understand why. And I think that kind of pointed to like the fractured nature of the story and the narrative. It's just like, it kind of bounced around so much.
It was interesting to me that we had title cards that were, screenplay title cards.
Yeah, I like that. That was kind of creative, especially because it's bouncing back and forth. You kind of needed that. I would always look at the right side of the screen and say 1934 or 1936. And then I could kind of like put myself like, okay, now I know where we are. I think that helped actually kind of let you follow the movie a little bit more easily.
Right. But it seemed like something that you would do in a movie that was made in the 90s.
Okay. Maybe
So
somebody
like, this is the way he wanted to make it back then. And did you read that he originally wanted Kevin Spacey and Jodie Foster to be in the main roles?
I read that. Who was Jodie Foster going to play?
To be Marion Davies, Amanda Seyfried.
But she
she would have been older for sure.
Oh, yeah, I guess she wouldn't have been that old in the 90s. I was thinking like, I mean, late 90s. That's like Contact, and I mean, she's like an adult woman in the late 90s. I mean, how old is Amanda Seyfried? Like 32, 31? I mean, I guess that could have worked. I feel like
with Kevin Spacey, it would have been creepy and it wouldn't have.
Yeah. Yeah, I just read a piece this morning about American Beauty and the screenwriter Alan Ball saying like, yeah, the movie's taken kind of a hit because of the Spacey.
Oh, I think that movie needed to take a hit no matter what. Didn't matter because it was Spacey.
American Beauty was my favorite film of all time for about 5 years.
Yeah, don't remind me.
I loved it. I professed my love of American Beauty to anyone who would listen for probably between 99 and 04.
I like the plastic bag stuff.
And now I'm kind of like doing this on American Beauty. I didn't really like it. No, I still think it's a strong film, but it is a very dated. Every year it just gets more dated. I watched it for its 20th anniversary last year. And I'm like, there's elements of the movie I still enjoy, but it's not. It didn't hit me at age 34 as it did at 14. Seeing that movie at age 14, it was just like, it was the right movie at the right time, but hasn't lasted very well. But Mank, I'll be curious to, like, in 10 years, is Mank going to be considered one of Fincher's best films, or if it'll be rediscovered? And I looked at Rotten Tomatoes earlier, and I mean, there's film critics the best movie of 2020. And I'm like, well,
really? There haven't been a lot of movies this year. But I think it may be like the Irishman situation. Like, what do you think about The Irishman? Do you think in 10 years people are going to be like, The Irishman, that's the movie? Or because right now it's like, yeah, it was really long, but that's what people think. But I think maybe in the future.
The Irishman made my top 10 of 2019. I really admired it, and it could have been a half hour shorter.
It could have been much, much shorter.
Yeah, 3.5 hours long. That was one thing I noted about Mank. What is it, about 2 hours and 10? I was like, boy, this could have been
two.
This could, Fincher could have made it 3 hours or something, and that would have been deadly. So I'm happy that it was as short as it was.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, anything else about the movie? I really liked like the little details, like we mentioned, the screenplay, the scene headings, maybe a few too many. We didn't need all of those. I like the real change marks. Did you notice those? Every 10 to 15 minutes, there'd be like a real change. Like
Yeah,
we
there's
used to
cigarette
have
burns
the
and
cigarette burns that we used
yeah.
to have when film was being projected, like on film. You get those real changes. I remember those in like in the 90s. And then once it all went digital, that went away. You don't get that anymore. But so I was like, I felt like the movie looked almost too pristine to have those cigarette burns, but it was still kind of like a cute little detail. I was on board with that. Um, anything else that I haven't mentioned? Anything else you want to say about Mank that we haven't talked about? Any other actors in the film that we liked? The actor who played Orson Welles was really good. Like the voice especially was like
Hey,
dead on.
this is Orson Welles.
This is Orson. I mean, it's kind of like that's a voice you have to nail. Like you can't.
Yeah,
you
his
can't
voice
just be
is
sort of
fantastic.
So that was really good.
I want to talk to you about our little project.
And then the ending, like it just sort of ends. Like there's not. I mean, is there really like an emotional catharsis here? It's like
just Wells gets mad at him because he wants screen credit.
Yeah,
and
you want screen credit for doing the work.
Throws his booze against the wall.
Yeah.
And then just cuts to him winning the Oscar. And then he's like, yeah, won the Oscar.
Well, and that's weird too, because we cut to the ceremony and neither one of them is there. And then we dissolve again to, Mankiewicz receiving his Oscar and giving a short speech like outside his home. And I'm just like, but like, it doesn't land because we didn't really get into the making of Citizen Kane at all. All of a sudden it's just, okay, the movie's been made, it's out, it's, got these Oscar nominations. I felt like if there was any part of the movie that could have been a little longer, I felt like there were 10, 15 minutes there we could have, I don't know. I didn't need to go into the production of the movie or anything, but it just felt like that. It was kind of like, oh, well, the movie won an Oscar for Mankiewicz, so we got to end with there. And it didn't really land well, I thought.
Right. For a movie about writing, there wasn't a lot of writing in it. I guess my platonic ideal of a movie about writing is like Barton and Fink, where the whole movie is procrastinating. Mm-hmm. And at the end, he just, goes crazy, he drinks a lot of coffee, and then he like writes the screenplay that they end up throwing away. Right. So,
I love movies about troubled writers. Sideways with Paul Giamatti. That's a great movie about a struggling writer who's out at the wineries getting the call from his agent. Like, just didn't work. It didn't sell. And he's just like full on like.
But he's not writing in it.
He's
drinking, and he's just getting rejected in lots of different ways.
That scene of him in the high school or whatever, and he's just kind of like looking out the window, like, oh god. So yeah, this would not be on my list of like great movies about writers. I felt like we needed more of the active writing in this movie, and I don't see why we didn't get more of that. We get like a couple moments, like he's like just telling Lily Collins, the typist, like what to write down. Like there's a great moment where he's like talking through a scene, and it's like he's very good at it, very articulate in his use of words. And
here's a question. We don't really know how he wrote it, right? And what scenes that he wrote and what he didn't, per se. So how would you do that in a movie about him without getting it wrong?
Okay, because like if we wanted a scene of him writing like a specific scene,
if he's like writing a scene or something,
fade in,
or it's like one of the most famous scenes in Citizen Kane, like the where he's doing the speech with the poster behind him, the political speech.
Okay,
and we have a play-by-play where Mank is writing that scene. Would that work at all? I don't know.
Well,
the whole movie was about the California election. So.
The movie seems to suggest that Mankiewicz wrote most or all of the screenplay. So wouldn't it make sense that there'd be a scene of him writing one of the most famous scenes from Citizen Kane? I don't know. I wouldn't have been against it. I'm like, how do you know he wrote this? This could have been Orson.
I guess the whole time you get people saying, like his brother's like, it's the best thing you've written. So we get lots of people telling you him it's the best, but we never really see that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I just felt like, okay, a black and white movie about classic Hollywood from David Fincher. I thought could have been better than the film that we got. That was kind of my
Well,
my
then
final.
then it would be about the Black Dahlia or something.
Oh my gosh, that would have been good. Yeah. Oh
That would
gosh,
be.
that the film version by De Palma from '06 with Hilary Swank and
Mhm.
Scarlett Johansson is not. It's not a good movie about the Black Dog. So yeah, if Fincher ever wanted to do
But
that, but
that would be totally up his alley.
it would be,
Easily.
it'd be very up his alley. All right, so let's talk about Fincher to end here. I'm curious, like, to know he's made. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 features. That's it. 11 feature films. If you had to pick 2 or 3 favorites, like what are like the go-tos? Like your favorite Fincher films, or the ones you think are the best directed, or the ones that you revisit the most?
I mean, like the basic answer would be like Fight Club.
Fight Club.
But
Which was also 1999. Speaking of American Beauty, that was such a crazy fall, right? We had like American Beauty, and then a week later we had Fight Club, and then we had Being John Malkovich. It was just like one after another.
And I don't revisit The Social Network, but I think it is one of the better ones.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because thinking about it, like, what's his strongest film? I think the strongest one from beginning to end is The Social Network, but it's not a film I necessarily revisit very much. Which is like, I think maybe in the last 5 years I've watched it one more time. I have the Blu-ray. It's great. I love the actors in it and the story, but yeah, there's something about The Social Network. You're not like, I want to put that on right now. Fight Club is more fun.
More fun, but I think it has also aged in a way.
Yeah.
And also most of the time, like, frat boys think it's about fighting and not like a critique of masculinity.
Yeah.
So there's that, but I think Fincher's like, he's consistent. Like Zodiac is a movie that I have watched many times, as opposed to like, though I just like it when he does a genre movie like Gone Girl or The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, because they're just really well done. That's what like Mindhunter is, that, but it's a show. And I think that is better.
Yeah, Gone Girl is an example of a movie I think with a different, lesser filmmaker would have just been an average movie that would have come and gone. But in the hands of Fincher, it's done so stylistically well. Like, just from beginning to end, you're in the hands of a very gifted filmmaker, and he makes it, I think, almost better than it had any right to be. It was like, that was a very much kind of like a genre film, Gone Girl, but it's great. And it made my top 10 list for 2014. And, I love that movie. Like, Ben Affleck was such perfect casting for that role. Like, it's great.
Do you know the story about how he wouldn't wear a Yankees hat in the movie and shut down the set? So like, being a big Red Sox fan, right? His character in the book wears a Yankees hat. And it's also a character because, like, if you're a Yankees fan, you're kind of a jerk, like, by stereotypes. And so he was like, I don't want to wear a Yankees hat. And David Fincher's like, come on, man. This is your job. I'm paying you.
Yeah, I don't think you have a choice as the actor.
And so their compromise was that he wore a Mets hat, because that was like still New York. But it's also like, if you're a Mets fan, then you have more heart because you have more struggle in your life. So anyway, that's an aside.
So what would be your least favorite? You mentioned Panic Room before, so you don't like Panic Room, huh?
Yeah, I think
that one's more of like a technical exercise than it is a movie. I agree with that.
Panic Room is a premise movie. The Game, like a premise movie. And I don't really like 7 because it's kind of gross. But
7's kind of a hard watch. I've watched it a few times. It's not one of my favorites. It was kind of his breakthrough, so it's important on that level, because Alien 3 could have like pulled him down forever. So the fact that he got the opportunity to make a second film, and 7 really plays into his sensibilities, I think is important. 7 is not in my top 5 Fincher movies. It's not one I like to watch. The ending's great. Like, the last 10 minutes is great.
What's in the box?
What's in the box? What's in the box?
Yeah.
Brad Pitt really goes for it at the end there.
So I don't know if Fincher will be remembered for like a specific movie, as opposed to his consistency. And
just as a on a technical level, his consistency there. I mean, I think there's certain kind of movies he likes to make, but they're not overly similar to each other. I think The Curious Case of Benjamin Button's a totally different kind of movie.
Right, that's one where he was doing something different.
That was like, it's my time to do Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
And it was a good. I mean, he got his first Oscar nomination for director for Benjamin Button, so it worked out in that in that way. And then he got nominated again for Social Network, and that was the one he got close to winning. He won the Golden Globe, he won the BAFTA, I think he won the Critics' Choice, but that was the year of The King's Speech. Tom Hooper beat Fincher for director, and then went on to make Cats.
Yeah, so maybe if Mankiewicz had more of a stutter, then this would be a shoo-in.
Yeah, Les Miserables and Cats. But yeah, I still think Fincher's Oscar is coming. Going into this, I thought, okay, this might be the one, because we haven't had a whole lot of movies released this year. As far as I know, they're still holding the ceremony in the spring. So I was like, okay, well, this is like classic Hollywood. That's kind of a subgenre of movies that the Oscars reward a lot, and he's overdue. He's been making films for 3 decades now, and so I think it's almost a certainty that Fincher will be nominated for Best Director. I think that's happening no matter what. The question is he going to win for this? I would be surprised, but we'll see what films come out in the next few weeks. I haven't seen a whole lot of films in 2020, mostly on streaming, right? That I've been like, wow, this is amazing. I haven't had that experience very much this
year. Everything that is super intriguing has been postponed. So
yeah, a lot of films that might have made my top 10 of 2020 have been pushed to 2021. And it's made really difficult this year because movies released in January, February qualify for the April Oscar ceremony. So that's really weird. I'm like, okay, so we're actually going to get some great films in January and February. Usually that's dumping ground.
On HBO Max. Yeah.
On HBO Max, exactly. These movies, I'm not really going to go to a theater right now unless it's some film that I am like, I have to see. I'm dying to see, and there's no other way to see it. I don't think we're getting that.
You'll be dying to see.
I will be dying to see. Well, I did see Tenet in the theater with my friend Brandon in September in IMAX, and we were 2 of 6 people in the whole theater, so I felt safe. But you had to watch the movie with a mask on for 2.5 hours. That wasn't fun. So I'm not going back. I'm not going back unless, so your favorites would be what? Social Network and Fight Club?
And Zodiac.
And Zodiac. Okay. Zodiac is an example of a movie. I saw it opening weekend. I liked it. I was kind of cold on it. And then I watched it again like a year later on Blu-ray, and I really came to love it the second time. I'm hoping I have that experience with Mank. I'm thinking, I think I'll like it more the second time I watch it now that I know what it's all about.
Yeah, I think I have a hot take, but one that I think Denis Villeneuve has made a couple movies that are better at doing Fincher than Fincher himself, and that would be like Prisoners and Incendies are both like Fincher movies that hurt, that like you can feel the knife.
He's taking the Fincher mantle.
Well, he was until he started doing all the sci-fi stuff.
Okay. Blade Runner 2049, and then he's got Dune coming out, which there's some controversy right now. I guess Warner Brothers has decided all of their major releases for 2021, regardless of if the vaccine is out and people are returning to theaters, they're just going to drop it on HBO Max the same day as it goes to theaters. I'm like, what are you doing, man?
Or a movie like Enemy that Villeneuve did.
Yeah, that was an interesting film.
It's also like kind of in the same Fincher mold. So I think Villeneuve is taking cues and applying it until he did sci-fi. Now he's stuck in sci-fi forever.
Yeah. And I like Fincher's other films we didn't mention. I really like The Game. You don't like I thought that was fun. The Michael Douglas movie, definitely plot heavy, right? And it's kind of like at the end you're like, okay, like that's what all this was. And then the one we haven't mentioned, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which was very much of like, kind of like Panic Room and like a kind of a technical exercise in a story that we were aware of.
Was a missed opportunity because they had cast people for the 3 books, for the 3 movies. They were going to do a trilogy.
Yeah.
They were like major actors playing bit roles that only had like 1 second of screen time.
They'll be in the next one.
Because they would be in the next one. And the studio is like, oh, it didn't make $1 billion, so we're not going to
it's like, what were they thinking? I read, I want to say that The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, the Fincher version from 2011, cost like $100 million to make, something crazy like that. And it's like, It's like this extremely dark thriller. Like why would that movie be a huge box
Yeah,
office
and I
sensation?
think it did better than break even. It wasn't a
Yeah.
but I think I'd seen interviews where David Fincher was like, I always wanted to make a hard R franchise,
Hmm.
and this seemed like the opportunity to do it. And then they pulled the plug after
So
one.
Fincher wanted to direct the other two. I didn't know that. He wanted to direct the 2 and 3.
Yeah, he wanted to make it like a series, and he would have done a good job. And I think Mindhunter is a little bit of what that could have
Yeah.
been, where you
Hmm.
get the Silence of the Lambs as if it was a TV show.
Hmm.
That's better than Hannibal. So
Yeah, I really like Mindhunter. That was creepy. I really enjoyed it. I hope they do a season 3. It sounds like they're not going to, but what's coming next? What is Fincher up to the next couple years? I don't know what his next move's going to be. What do we think he's going to do next? Serial killer?
I think that would be the easiest. Like, so maybe look at what books are really popular. He's done The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. He's done Gone Girl.
Yep.
Is there another like a very dark, murdery thriller that is going to be a big bestseller? And then he'll get the rights and they'll do it. I think that.
Yeah. What's like the really big sensational like book of the year that has a lot of murder and mayhem? Because Gone Girl was 2012, the book came out, and then the film was 2014, so that was pretty close to the just 2 years after the release of the book.
It's been a while.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll be curious to see what his next 10 years have in store. Are we going to get more films like kind of outside the bubble of the serial killer, kind of dark thriller? Is he going to do more like Mank and do something kind of different that we're not expecting? Time will tell. We'll see what he's up to next. But thank you, Harrison, for doing this for me. This was a lot of fun talking to you again, this time about a new movie and not an old movie. I apologize that I didn't love the movie as much as I wanted to come out on here and just gush for an hour. That was the plan. But I'm not going to lie. So I had to come on and just say my piece. And again, one last time, say I will be looking at the film again, and we'll see if my opinion changes on it. But if you're a fan of Fincher, if you're a fan of classic Hollywood, you can't really avoid this one. It's on Netflix for everybody to see. So
you're paying for it. So just
so yeah, it's worth a look. Great actors, great photography. You won't be upset at watching it, but just be prepared for maybe it not being, the greatest David Fincher movie of all time. It's not
fun
one
than
of
Roma.
More fun than Roma. Now, Roma's a great film, but not a fun watch by any means. And that's sometimes, I feel like every December on Netflix we get one like that where you kind of have to watch it. If you're a film person, you have to watch it.
Yeah, because it's whatever Netflix is pushing to be the Oscar movie. Last year it was The Irishman. The year before is Roma, right?
Yeah, I'll be very curious to see how Mank does at the Oscar ceremony. I mean, I could see it getting 10 plus nominations. Will it win a lot outside of maybe technical stuff? I'll be surprised to see. I think Amanda Seyfried is a shoo-in for Best Supporting Actress. I think Gary Oldman will probably be nominated for Best Actor, just because it is a weird year where there's not a whole lot of competition this year compared to others. But I don't think he's going to win. I would be very surprised.
Well, he just won, right? He got the Oscar with.
He gets the Oscar in the movie. Would be really curious to see would be if Jack Fincher won the Oscar for screenplay. Like, I guess David would accept it. Yeah. To imagine winning an Oscar 18 years after your death. that's a long time. But yeah, so so you would give it what, like an 8 out of 10, 8.5?
Yeah, I give it an 8.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'd give it like a 7. And yeah, don't think I'm just hating on this movie. It's definitely worth a look. If you're interested in film and film history, it's worth a look.